Welcome to the Fegan Method Masterclass. This will serve as your introduction to this groundbreaking process that empowers learners in acquiring skills and knowledge and retaining it for as long as they want. I designed this process for probably the same reason you're investigating it. The current school system is failing us. There are several reasons for this, not the least of which is the design of the curriculum. Who knows the children better than the local school system? And why are some programs prescribed by the government officials, many who have never spent a single day in a public school as either a teacher or a student? Who designs how long the class sessions need to be, what order to teach the material, what textbooks to use, which students pass and which do not? How much of a voice do the parents have in educating their children? Isn't an educated populace to the benefit of the country? Why is it treated like a glorified child care center so both parents can go off to work? Why is it mired in the political sludge of Common Core math, revisionist history, politically correct literature, social constructs, and courses of study that allow administrators to check off a box and continue to get funding? Does it make sense that teachers, after having spent 4 years in college, taken countless tests, spent one semester observing and one semester student teaching, achieved the requirements for an education degree and is now in debt over $50,000, this person must now take a state test to see if they're qualified to teach advanced algebra to kindergartners? Who would want to go through all of that to get a thankless job in an underfunded school with confused standards of proficiency and behavior for the pittance that they get paid? It seems that when the government steps in to improve education, it tends to get worse. You may be asking yourself, how is she qualified to enlighten us in the nuances of teaching and learning? I'm glad you asked. I've been teaching for half a century. Let that sink in. I have a degree in education and one in finance. I developed and used the method I'm going to show you for everything I've taught, from music to math, from science to soccer, from kindergarten to college. I've also used the method to expand my horizons to get certifications in insurance, investments, coaching, cooking. I know this process works. If you pay attention, if you pick up on the stuff that I'm going to show you, I will give you the opportunity to continue your education and expand your horizons and the children in your care. Let's take a look at it. This is the learning curve. Now, a learning curve describes how we approach new material. There's an initial part which is very difficult, and then with practice, it gets better until the new information is integrated into our systems and we can use it for things that will come later. Well, let's take a look at how this works. First, we describe what is learning. It's expanding your knowledge base and expanding your skill base. Knowledge base is the stuff that you can recall at a moment's notice, something that you remember that you can use in solving problems. Your skill base are the things that you use, the processes that you string together that allow you to walk, to ride a bike, to play a game, to watch a mystery movie and figure out who the bad guy is. These processes are strung together so that we can move forward in our education and explore new places to get knowledge and expand the skills that we have. Let's take a look. Start out with knowledge. In the traditional system, all information comes from an outside source. Children don't know anything. You have to put stuff into them so they can understand. The priorities are also chosen by someone else. Sometimes it's the parents, sometimes it's the teachers, sometimes the administration, the school board, the state, the country. So how do they get those integrated into a coherent educational system? It's not easy. Information is transferred to the greatest number of people in the least amount of time because we have to get these kids through all the stuff in order to become productive citizens. And like the questions I asked before, how long are each of the sessions? How much material do they need to cover? And a lot of times that is out of our control. Let's take a look at the skill set. Skills are directed by an outside source, just like the knowledge. They're measured by competition. Who's the fastest runner? Who dribbles the best? Who can stand on point longer? Who can solve the most problems in math class? Who can write the best stories? And skills are prioritized according to the developmental state of the student. Now, how this is found is through testing, and standardized tests don't always measure what they purport to measure. We've discovered in most of the examinations of students that the purpose of the test is not to see how much they can recall. It's not to see how well they use the information. It's not in order to make sure that they've got their priorities straight into what happens first when they're learning. The test is basically to see how well they take a test. Now, if you've ever taken an assessment test or accreditation test, you know this is true. In some tests, they make the questions unreasonably vague or outside the scope of our study, just to make sure that only the top people at taking tests get in to the system. For instance, in insurance accreditation, a lot of the stuff that you will see on the test, you will never see in live. I've been an insurance agent for 20 years and I have yet to see a biatical settlement. I'm not going to tell you what that is. You can look that up. But it's not something you'll come across. And yet, out of 150 questions, there were 7 questions on the test having to do with this little known trivia. Every single educational path that you take in college starts out with a flunk out test, one that's meant to discourage people from coming into the area so that they don't have to worry about the tire kickers and the wannabes. The problem is it just measures how well they take a test. It doesn't measure what they want to know. Therefore, assessing the skills and assessing the knowledge by taking a test is probably not a very accurate way of placement when it comes to putting kids into groups according to their mental abilities or their physical skills. It just doesn't quite fit the bill. But we use that because we have to get the most students through the most material in the least amount of time. How does this apply? Well, information is used as a basis for further study. So you can't move on to 7th grade until you've mastered the skills in 6th grade. You can't move on to advanced algebra until you've had algebra 1. You can't go and play a concerto on the piano until you've played 3 Blind Mice. It makes perfect sense. But the advancement that we are seeing in our school system is based on age, not competence. You will find a learning curve like what we talked about in every single grade. So they'll start out here, and then average people will be up here, and then you'll have the people that are really, really fine over here. These guys will get past, these guys will get past, these guys will get past. These guys are bored, these people are okay, these people are completely lost. Why not go by competence? Because they don't know how to test that. They just know how to test how well people take a test. Are you getting as frustrated as I've been? Well, let's take a look at how it's put into practice. The schools as we know them are based upon the idea that the mind is an empty slate, that there's nothing in there until we put something in there. Let's consider this. Let's look at these. Memorization is the key to all learning, because what you put in there has to come out somehow. And the only way to make sure it stays there is to memorize it. Repetition in whole is the best way to memorize. Now let's take a look at this. When you were in junior high, you probably studied the Gettysburg Address. How much do you remember? 407 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, as F, yes. And then there's that last line, that this nation, for the people, by the people, to some people, last of the people, should not perish from, I don't know. Okay, so obviously that was just an exaggeration, but you can see most people will not know the whole address. Why? Because when was the last time they had to learn it? And how did they study it? They just repeated it from the beginning all the way to the end. And what they learned is the first opening and the ending, and everything in the middle was less. It's gone. It's floating out in space somewhere. Analysis is beyond the capability of students. Well, that makes sense. How can you analyze if you don't have all the facts? And all the facts have to be put into your brain because there's nothing in there. Well, take a look at analysis. When you are choosing teams in elementary school to play kickball or softball or whatever, when you're choosing teams for a race, you're analyzing which kids are the fastest and which ones are the slowest. You want only the fastest on your team. Isn't that an analysis? When you are looking at a word problem in math, and the whole time it's talking about apples and Mary and John, and apples coming in and apples going out, and you have to analyze exactly what they're looking for in the problem. Now, they've never been taught to read the last sentence of the problem to realize if you know what they're looking for, then you know what you can look for. But they read the whole problem, and then they have to analyze what needs to be done to find the answer. That's analysis. An analysis is also based mostly on logic, but we don't teach logic. Why would we do that? They don't need to know that until geometry. They learn to prove theorems and stuff. Why would they need to start that right now? And, resourcefulness cannot be taught because you either got it or you don't. You can't teach resourcefulness, except babies have it. They figure out all kinds of stuff. You've seen the toddler that climbs to the top of the refrigerator to get the cookies. How did he do that? Did you teach him how to climb up on top of the refrigerator? I would be willing to bet you didn't. But he figured it out. Did you figure out how your kids were playing whatever game they were playing outside, and suddenly a stick became a wand of something that turned people into rodents? Or when they discovered that when they jumped out of the swing, they were trying to learn how to fly and learning how to land without breaking both their ankles. Children naturally have this resourcefulness. Why don't we all make use of this resourcefulness when we get into school? It's not taught. They don't need to be taught, but it is also not required. And because it's not required, it isn't learned. It isn't practiced. And the worst assumption of all of this is that all students learn the same speed. And we know they don't. Is it a bad thing that people learn at different speeds? No. As long as they learn what they're supposed to know, who cares how long it takes? That's where the model starts to fall apart, because we have to get the most students taught in the least amount of time, because we have to get them through everything. Well, let's take a look. How do we do this? Well, a lot of smart people came up with this. You have to have facts before concepts, rules before play, concrete before abstract, isolation of subject matter so that they don't get confused, efficiency in content delivery, and all students learn the same way. Somebody stands up in front of the class and draws pictures on the board. It might be words, it might be numbers. Have you ever seen toddlers play? Rules? We don't need no stinking rules. And concrete before abstract? Well, yeah, concrete would be when you fall down on your bike, and abstract is like, let's see here, when the angular momentum gets to a certain speed, the balance on the bank, they don't know about angular momentum, but they're riding a bike. Does that make any sense? So they are learning abstract and concrete at the same time. And isolation of subject matter, what of the stuff that you learn in English helps you in your math? Why don't we study those together? You know, the people that do the best on the word problems are the people that hate math and love English. And the people that absolutely hate English and adore math discover that they can follow a plot line through a very convoluted story and make sense of it simply because they know how to look at problems. They know how to look at the ideas behind what the book is saying and follow the steps, sort of like CSI. You follow the evidence. And because they are mathematicians, they look at stories in a different way than English majors do. Can you use both English and science together? Can you use both foreign language and mathematics together? Absolutely. Why? Because they're both representational. Can you learn poetry if you know math? Yes, it's representational. You see this? So everything is related to each other, and yet it's taught separately. Stovepipe. So if you are in a math class, or better yet, in a history class, and you have to write a paper, they won't redline your paper for mistakes in spelling, bad paragraphs, bad logic. They won't redline that. It's what's underneath that's important, because communication has no part in history. Well, do you suppose maybe that's why history keeps repeating itself, because nobody communicates? And the idea that all students learn the same way is ludicrous. You know people that can close their eyes and see pictures of three-dimensional objects rotating and understand how pyramids are shaped and can picture them in their heads. You also know other people studying the same pyramids that will look at that as formulas. It's a completely different concept. They're both visual learners, but one is looking at constructs of based on sight and three-dimensional feeling, and another is built on the understanding of the mathematical constructs that direction. So they're both constructs and they're both visual, but they're not the same. And you also know someone who can hear a lecture once and understand and remember everything that was said, and someone who couldn't remember what was said 2 seconds ago. You learn people who have to be holding things and manipulating things with their hands in order to get a handle on it. How can you teach all the students the same way and expect them all to understand? So there are a lot of flaws in this particular model of education. So what are the results of this? Well, they're uneven. There's a low retention rate. There's a low application rate. There's disempowerment that happens because you cannot have this information unless someone gives it to you. You are completely dependent on someone determining what's important, when it's important, how much is important. The things that the teacher stresses in the class may not be the most important thing for you to know to become a full person, to become an understanding person. And they stress a lack of resourcefulness. They will not tell you, if you don't understand this, I have a good book for you to read. They will just tell you the answer. If you don't know how to do this, experiment, see what works and what doesn't. No, you have to memorize this and this and this and this and this and do this exactly the same way all the way through, even if the question doesn't use that model. It reduces communication and leadership skills simply because you are regurgitating whatever somebody else thinks is important. And you follow because, once again, you're disempowered. And in following, those who are slightly better at leadership skills will be able to lead you wherever they want you, pull you by the nose ring. And who are these people? People of strong will, bullies. Brilliant people are afraid to say things out loud because they do not have the leadership skills. built in. They don't get a chance to practice those. They don't get a chance to explore these. So the people that end up being in charge are the people that shouldn't be in charge. In addition, we have stunted imagination. I once went into a kindergarten class and I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they all laughed. And I thought, why is this funny? They said, why would you even ask that? I said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? It says, doesn't matter what I want to be when I grow up. I'm going to work at the factory. And all the little kids in that class, that kindergarten class, agreed with him. We didn't have firemen and policemen and astronauts and mountain climbers. We had everybody going to the factory. They had no imagination whatsoever. How was this beaten out of them by age 5? Could it be the bombardment of television? Could it be the bombardment of all of the Facebook and media that we see? Everything that tells us that we are not worthy, that we're not smart, we're not good enough, we don't have what it takes to become anything that we want. Do you get frustrated when you see this happening? Do you notice that in your own kids? Have they already given up? Do they already know that they don't have what it takes? That just breaks my heart. The low retention rate, because the type of learning that they use isn't applied anywhere. So your math is only used in math class. And when they use it in science class, it's confusing because they use different letters. It should translate between. The application rate is so low because you can only stovepipe what you know. You can't use English and math. You can't use math and history. You can't use history and music. You can't use, and yet, if you look at the Renaissance era, take a look. They're using all of those all the time, interchangeably. There has to be a better way. There's a different model. Let's take a look at it. Instead of limiting our idea of what learning is, let's take a look at it this way. Let's change the perspective. What really is learning is raising your awareness and increasing your consciousness. Oh, that sounds like a bunch of hoodoo, doesn't it? Raising your awareness. What is around you? How do the birds fly? Why are the grass green and the trees tall? Why does this bird sing a different song than that bird? What does that bee actually saying when he bounces around like that? How come I can ride a bike and my neighbor can't? What's the difference between my car and your car? What's the difference between my mom and your mom? When you're raising your awareness, you're taking a really good look at what's around you and how you see things and how you experience things. When you're increasing your consciousness, you're asking how these things relate to each other. How do you make decisions? Do you react or do you respond? Do you have to have a whole group of people that has a consensus before you can make a decision? Does it really matter what everybody thinks? Do you ever aspire to be more than what you are? To be more patient, more insightful, more inventive? Do you ever see a different you? Do you know people that set up a discipline that helps them attain this aspiration to be more and do more, are more likely to get it? That's why they set SMART goals. That's why they have vision boards. They want to get there. And so they set up a discipline to make sure that it happens. But first of all, they have to decide, what do they have within them? So before they can go from what do I want to be to setting up a discipline, they have to find out where they are. What kind of strengths and weaknesses do they have? Where are they going throughout this whole process? And then they are moved into experience that is not just, isn't that interesting, but actively evaluated and actively used for the lessons that it teaches you, so that you can apply what you've learned from other experiences to the one that you're in now, so that you're able to apply what you're learning now to what you want to do in the future. This is the most important thing that we know, is the consciousness level that you are determines what you become. Let's take a look at that a little bit closer. Whoops, wait a minute. That's right. There we go. Okay. All right. So the first thing that we need to take a look is awareness. You have to be aware of your surroundings, aware of your strengths and weaknesses, aware of your wants and needs, and aware of the resourcefulness that you already have. Now, by your surroundings, we're not talking desk, floor, chair, car, house. We're talking about the people you surround yourself with, the information that you surround yourself with, the experiences that you choose to make, where you travel, who you hang around. Once you're aware of all of that around you, you can see trends, things that you didn't know that you were looking for. Did you know that all of your friends has the same colored car? I'll bet you didn't. Well, okay. How aware are you of this trend in your own thinking? Are you aware of the level of education of the people that you surround yourself? Are you aware of how you treat your possessions? Are you neat and tidy? Or does it look like a tornado blew through there? Next, you have to be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. Now, there are tests that you can take to find out what those are. But introspection seems to work just as well, and it's cheaper. What do you like to do? What productive things give you the most joy? That's probably a strength. What would people say about you? Oh, he's the best listener. Oh, he tells the best stories. Oh, nobody can cook like this gal. Oh, you should see how she just calms that horse down, walks up to it, and the horse just, oh, here I am. Hi. And someone who has a green thumb. Those would be strengths. Now, take a look at your weaknesses. I know my weakness is when it comes to gardening. I have a brown thumb. I could plant a live onion and it would look at me and die right just as I put it into the ground. It just give itself up. I know that I have more weeds in my garden than I have flowers. And I know that my tomatoes tend to die on the vine before I get around to picking them. That would be a weakness. Is that something that I want to improve? Well, yes, but it's not first on my priorities list. Are you aware of your wants and your needs? Well, okay, you know about Maslow and all of his needs. You have to have food, water, shelter, safety. And most people will stop at that. Because if you've got all of those things, what else do you need? I mean, really. Yes. Okay. All right. So we've got water. Let's have hot water. All right. Okay. So now we have hot water. Okay. So we live in a tent. Let's get a house. Let's get a mansion. Let's get a castle. Let's get a maid. If you have food, well, hey, look what I found here. Oh, I found an old sandwich that nobody finished. I can eat that. Or I would like a gourmet 12-course meal served on china plates. Both of those approaches to the needs are valid. So if you're taking a look at somebody who would be considered homeless, he's not homeless. He's got a specific place that he goes to sleep. He has a specific place that he goes to eat. He may not feel very safe, but he knows who he can trust. His needs are taken care of. And then there are those people who have endless money and huge houses and fancy cars and people to wait on them hand and foot, and they don't have everything they need. They keep looking for more. Some people get their wants and their needs confused. The wants are the things that will make your life easier, more fun, but they're not needed for you to survive. The thing that stops everybody is that the hierarchy of needs goes farther than just the basics. It goes into self-actualization. It goes to community. And when you've got self-actualization at the top, that means you have arrived as a person that you want to be. Nobody ever gets there, but they always strive for it. But that's a special group of people. That's why it's shaped as a triangle, because so few people make it. It's not because it's not available to everybody. It's because so few people seek it. Oh, so the actual shape is more of a cylinder than a triangle. It allows you to go in 3 dimensions, all the way up to the top and all the way down to the bottom. And everybody has the same opportunities. And that's where resourcefulness comes in. This is where you are in charge of how you get what you want and how you become what you need to be. Now let's see how we do that. We start out at a certain point and knowing what we want to be and what we want to achieve, there will be a gap, a skill that needs to be developed, some missing information that needs to be filled in, a lack of understanding of how one thing relates to another. Now, this can be discovered and then worked on a piece at a time, because once you know what is missing, you can generally find out how to bridge that gap. So let's say, for instance, you are a soccer player and you're a very young soccer player and you've discovered that you can only dribble with your right foot. Well, what do you need to do? Well, you need to dribble with your left foot. So you practice kicking the ball with your left foot. Now, just kicking the ball doesn't help. It has to be targeted practice. It has to be analyzed. What are you doing differently with your left foot than you are with your right? Oh, well, sometimes you need somebody to help you out. Somebody needs to look at you and see exactly what the difference is. But they're not going to develop the skill for you. I mean, they can't go out there and move your leg for you. That would be ludicrous. So then you design an approach. You practice your left-footed kicking skills and you run down the field kicking only with your left foot. And then you do it again, kicking only with your left foot back the way you came. And slowly but surely, your left foot gets the idea. If I kick it like this, it goes where I want it. If I kick it like this, it goes the speed I want it. If I kick it like this, it bounces and I can't control it. All of these things are analyzed in your head and transferred to your leg so that it works. So now you've got it done in your left foot. Now you know how to dribble with your left foot. Okay, how about missing information? Well, you have to do a paper having to do with the Russian Revolution, and you're missing the major players. Where would you look? See, this is stuff that you can find. You don't have to go and say, hey, what is it? Give me the answer, and then fill in the blank and congratulations, you know it. No, because what's happened is that you have not engaged your own resourcefulness to find the missing information. And lack of understanding, sometimes it takes observation. Sometimes it takes actually getting your hands dirty to see the relationships. Sometimes it takes discussion. Sometimes it takes someone who is well-versed in what you're trying to learn to explain why something works and why something else doesn't. This is what is missing from our school systems. They're not concentrating on allowing the students to develop the skills to find the missing information or to find the understanding. And yet, goodness gracious, American children are growing up, and by age 3, they have a working knowledge of the English language, which makes no sense to any other people in the world. How can you understand English? It's a hodgepodge of everything that is wrong with all the other languages. And yet, we have 3-year-olds that understand this. They even get the grammar right most of the time. English grammar makes no sense, none. And yet, we have 3-year-olds that do that. So it's possible for us to come to our own understanding. That's the experimental phase. Now we come to the analysis phase. We fill in those gaps. We find out where to find the information. We take steps toward improving the skill, and we look for sources to improve our understanding. In doing this, we're analyzing what needs to be fixed, what needs to be improved, what needs to be taken a deeper look at to understand on a deeper level. But that's only the first part of the problem. We next need targeted practice. See, you practice what you don't already know. You don't practice the stuff that you do know. For instance, back to our Gettysburg Address, everybody starts at the beginning and goes all the way through the end. Then they start at the beginning and they go all the way through the end. And then they start at the beginning and go all the way. They get the beginning and the end right, and they mess up the middle. Why? Because the part they don't know is not at the beginning. The part they don't know is in the middle, and they don't start in the middle. They have to start at the beginning. That does not make sense. If you are working on a wood project and you measure the piece that you need and you cut it and it's too short, do you keep on measuring it? It doesn't serve any purpose. You have to get another piece of wood. And then you have to find out, what did you do that messed up that first one and made you cut it too short? See? So what are you practicing? You're practicing your measuring. You're not practicing your cutting. You already know how to cut. You already know how to place the tape measure. You just didn't know how to read it right. You see what I mean? Okay, so let's take a look how we focus on the gaps. This is probably something you've never heard. There's nothing new. Of course, there's new stuff. I mean, you learned a new word today, didn't you? Well, pulchritudinous, I don't know. Is that a new word? No, it's based on some other words that I understand. Oh, I learned how to play a new song. It's not a new song because it's based on a scale, you know. It's based on an instrument, you know. I learned a new story. No, it's probably based on an old story that you know. I've read something new. I learned a new dish. I learned a new, it's not new. We discover facts based on how we got there far enough to see material we haven't seen before. Does that make any sense? So let's go back and say we're Greek and we look up in the sky and we say, oh, look at those pretty little blinky lights. And then somebody says, hey, that one is moving. It was over there last night and tonight it's over there. Huh, are you sure it's the same light? Could be, yeah. And then they track them and they say, well, some of these wander around. So you've got regular stars and then you've got wanderers. Oh, by the way, planet means wanderer. See, you learned something, didn't you? You already knew that. Once they found out that planets moved, then they figured that they moved back and forth just because they like to mess with us. And then Galileo says, no, they're circling, but they're not circling us. They're circling the sun. And people said, you are completely crazy. Yeah, no, the earth is the center of everything. Everything revolves around the earth. He says, no, the earth revolves around the sun. You are absolutely crazy. He was told to give up his wild imaginings. And as he was walking out the room, he says, unless it moves. So we find connections to what we know based on where we are at the time. Now, Galileo would not have been looking for moving planets had the Greeks not discovered that some of the stars moved. And we wouldn't have an idea of what our Milky Way looks like unless Galileo had taken his telescope and discovered some things that we already knew were out there. Now we compare the stuff that we know to the stuff that we're unfamiliar with to find differences. Then we look for applications. Then we dig deeper into the material. Every time we are working from someplace we know. You're thinking, there's got to be something new. Okay, here's one that is new, absolutely, positively new. It's your first breath. Now, up until then, you have been floating around in material that is liquid. And you can't see, and you can't smell, and you can't experience anything outside this dark, warm, liquidy place. Suddenly you are in a bright light, your eyes squeeze shut, and you're cold. They've never been cold before. But that's not scary until suddenly they're inhaling this scary stuff called air, and they know they're going to die because you can't breathe air. This is, where's the cool stuff that I'm used to breathing? No. This is brand new. They're inflating their lungs for the very first time. Can they move their arms and legs around? Yes. Do they have control? No. But because they know that their arms and legs move around, they will eventually roll over and then sit and then crawl and then walk and then run and then, like Usain Bolt, like football players, like javelin throwers, like high jumpers, like mountain climbers. All of these are based on funny walks. And yet you were doing those same actions when you were a baby. Can you grab things? Yes. So what's the difference between grabbing things and playing the piano? You do one finger at a time. Oh. So everything that you are knowing right now is based on stuff that you have learned just by living. When you look for other applications, how many people actually look for other applications after they've learned something? What does music have to do with anything? Oh, it has everything to do with everything, but that's just my opinion. No. Take a look at it. What are you looking at when you look at a musician? Are you looking at physically playing an instrument? Or are you looking at coordination exercises between eyes and hands? Are you looking for understanding abstract concepts such as pitch and dynamics? Are you looking at this musician as someone who makes music in and of himself? What about the guy that wrote the music? How does this musician know what the other guy meant by his music? How does he change it from just notes to something that elicits emotional response? He has to make other applications. All right. Can this be done when you're reading poetry? Well, yeah. Can this be done mathematically when you're looking at a construct and you can see that there is a physical picture that results from what you are describing on paper? Oh, it's a graph. Oh, it's a line. Oh, it's a sine curve. You're interpreting abstract notation in order to bring forth something tangible and something visible. Okay. All right. How about he's sitting in an orchestra? Now he's not only listening to himself, He's listening to all the other players, and his part has to fit in with theirs. So we're talking teamwork. You're talking making music where you don't have the most important part, but you support that part. And whoever has the most important part doesn't always keep the most important part. So if you take a look at a Beethoven symphony, sometimes the melody is in the violins and sometimes it's in the cello. Sometimes it's in the brass, sometimes it's in the woodwinds. You can see that it's what? Soccer. You're moving the ball around to different players. You're moving the melody around to different players. So you can see that the music has applications much bigger than just tooting in your horn or tinkling on the ivories. And digging deeper into the material makes you even more curious, so that you explore other areas that you hadn't even considered before. Now, you've bridged the gaps. We got that little guy dribbling with his left foot. He has to be able to do that anytime he wants to. And he wants to apply that to the whole process. Checks for smooth transitions, and then he either uses it or teaches it. Now, when you are using it, you are refining your own skill level. If you are teaching it, you are not only refining your skill levels simply by demonstrating, but understanding on a deeper level why this new skill works. And it could be a feeling, it could be a process, it can be a perspective. But if you're trying to teach it, you have to put it into the perspective that your student can understand. So how does this work when you've got the gaps bridged? Where does that lead you? So you started out here, and then there was this gap, and then there's here, and then you got the bridging material. And it may not mesh exactly with what you've got before or what you had afterwards. But the more you use it, the smoother the transition gets. So that this is one plane rather than two planes bouncing around each other. What are the results? Well, first of all, retention is longer. It raises the consciousness to a new level, because now you have the benefit of experience. You have the benefit of setting goals and allowing your discipline to make you better at bridging those gaps. And because it comes from inside of you, it stays longer. And because it raises your consciousness to new levels, you respond rather than react. You are able to understand on a deeper level why this stuff is sticking to your brain. It encourages resourcefulness instead of represses it. So when they say, oh, we can't do it that way, it's never been done that way. And you say, oh, really? And you look around and you find stuff that works, even though they say it's impossible. Oh, no way you can climb the Mount Everest. That's ridiculous. There's no air up there. You would die. And it's too cold, and the storms and the winds, and it's treacherous, and you don't know anybody that's ever been up there because you're the first one, so it's not possible to. And then they've got 1,500 people a year go up there. They have traffic jams. So people find a way, and it promotes innovation. What if we could? I saw something yesterday. My daughter was on a climbing wall at the college. And usually when you're on a climbing wall, you have some requirements for safety. And you'll have somebody on one rope to make sure that the person that's on the wall doesn't fall down. You can catch them before they get hurt. She was going up without somebody holding the other end of the rope. There was a pulley at the top. It was called an auto belay. Now, when I was learning how to crawl up walls and stuff, they didn't have that. If there wasn't somebody down at the bottom to catch you, you didn't go. And yet there she was climbing up this wall. It must have been 30 feet. And she had this auto belay. I was there. It was an innovation that we'd never seen before. How would you like some sort of an amazing communications application that would allow you to talk to somebody no matter where if you knew the code number? Oh, it's a telephone. Oh, how about Facebook? Oh, how about text messaging? How about satellites? How about, see, so all of this innovation happens because there's a gap that needs to be filled and somebody sees a connection. It allows people to be more self-reliant. They don't have to constantly seek somebody to solve their problems. It also makes them less gullible. Now, what do I mean by that? It used to be that if it was written in the newspaper, it was true. But we kind of know that's not true anymore. Because remember all of those silly rags? Yes, my uncle is an alien. Oh, of course, Elvis is still alive. Oh, yes, you can use vinegar to make your toes grow straight. All kinds of stuff. And we thought what people need is more information. So we gave them more information and unlimited access to Google and to Facebook and to TikTok and Instagram and anything else that you want to talk. And they will still believe the stupidest things. They do not know how to be self-reliant when it comes to gathering information. So they'll believe anything that is convenient and allows people to assign importance to somebody that can solve the problem or take the blame. Can we agree that less gullible people would be a better thing for our country than more gullible people? So targeted practice makes smart use of our time. Now, I know this seems like brand new, and it's going to be a little bit confusing, simply because the most unfortunate thing about education is that you spend just as much time unlearning as you do learning. Let's take a look at that. What you have been taught all of these years in school and all of the stuff that you have come up through with your experiences and the people that you've learned to trust, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so what do we do about this? How do you know that your little system works, Mrs. Fegan? Well, my son came home from school one day and he said, well, I have to go to summer school. I said, oh, really? What happened? He says, well, I flunked math, English, and biology. And I'm sorry, Mommy. Oh, how did you flunk all of those classes? He said, well, I didn't do my homework or turn it in, but I don't know. Now, to his credit, he didn't blame the teacher. But when he did his Iowa basic skills test, and I'm thinking everybody has to do that at least once a year, he tested in the 20th percentile, down on the bottom. He couldn't take a test to save his life. And yet I knew he wasn't stupid. I knew he wasn't ignorant. I knew he was a brilliant kid and just did not know how to take tests. So what did I have to do? Well, I went up and I talked to the teachers and I said, okay, what does he have to do? Well, he has to go to summer school. Okay, I understand that. All right. So how long are the classes, and give me all the stuff. So they said, well, it's very simple. He has to do 2 hours per day for every subject that he needs to pass. Okay, so 2 hours for biology and 2 hours for, oh no, we don't teach biology. Does he need biology to move up to 8th grade? Nah. I'm thinking, then why did you teach it? So 2 hours for math and then 2 hours for English. Okay, so it starts in June and ends in June. This got me a little confused. The kids go to school 180 days every year. And even if they spend 50 minutes in class, that's still about, what, 90 hours on every class? More than that. Oh, well, okay, it'll be close to 160 hours. 160 hours on a class for a whole year, and yet he was only having to spend 2 hours a day for a month. Wait a minute. Okay, let's do some math here. Oh gosh, my brain is hurting. Okay, 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, 10 hours a week, 40 hours. Where are the other 120 hours that he needs to understand the stuff that he missed this last semester? And she looked at me and said, he doesn't need that much. Oh, and we only go 4 days a week. Wait, 32 hours of summer school takes care of a whole semester's worth of information that he's supposed to have learned over this past year? Yeah, that's about right. I'm thinking, well, then why do you have them go for a full year? Why don't you get the 32 hours done and call it quits? It doesn't make any sense. What could you teach if you had 160 hours? 160 hours in this stuff? They'd be college level by now if they were learning as fast as they were in summer school. And she still looked at me funny. So he went through his classwork in June and came home, and he still wasn't very good at math, and he still wasn't very good at English. You know, we thought, well, let's work on the math because that's the one that seems to be giving you the most trouble. And we got some books and we looked at some study materials, and he studied at home over the summer. Then he took a test, the assessment test at the end of the program, and he jumped 2 grades. Now, understand, this kid had flunked 7th grade, and they were going to pass him on to 8th grade just because he was old enough. Does that make any sense whatsoever? No. How is he going to be able to keep up with the 8th grade stuff if he couldn't understand the 4th grade stuff that he was stuck on? Yeah, he was testing at the 4th grade level in math, and he was expected to go into 8th grade. He was testing at the 5th grade level in English and spelling. reading comprehension. And yet it was okay. He was going to go on to 8th grade and he'll do fine. In what universe is that? Well, not in this one. So what did he have to do to get caught up? I'm guessing you're asking the same question. After all of this COVID stuff, how is my kid ever going to get caught up to what a normal kid in his grade is going to be? They've skipped all of this stuff. Can you imagine your first grader is going to start in school in 4th grade and has never been in a classroom? I don't know. So we decided we were going to homeschool during 8th grade. I pulled him out. I said, we can do this. We did this over the summer. Let's see how we go. So we got him in English and history and math and science and literature and all the stuff that he had to do. And then, of course, he had to take saxophone lessons because I'm a mean old nasty lady and I like to see him in pain. But the idea behind that was that we were going to study and use the method I just showed you with the discovery, the experimentation, the analysis, filling the gaps, targeted practice, and resolution. And the only way that he was going to study was using that method because I knew it worked. So naturally, that was the year that we were celebrating the bicentenary of the Lewis and Clark travel, all the way up from Jefferson City, all the way up to Montana and over there by the Pacific Ocean, way up there, Oregon, Washington area. And we were celebrating that. So everything had to do with that. We studied the botany, that plants that they were having to do. He studied the river currents. He studied the wildlife. He studied the seasons. He studied the poisonous plants. He studied the health. He studied how they moved their ship and why it was built the way it was. He learned a little bit of economics by studying how the party managed to negotiate all of the toll roads from the Jefferson City up all the way across and over to where the Missouri kind of cut out. They had to deal with lots of different cultures. We studied the cultures. We studied some of the language. So you can imagine, it was just unbelievable. He was working from dawn to dusk trying to get all, no, he wasn't. He started at 9 and generally was done by noon or 1 o'clock. So I must have been slacking. No, he was getting his stuff done. I was grading it. We'd go on to the next stuff. At the end of his 8th grade year, he decided he wanted to go into high school so he could be in the band. But in order to get into the high school, he had to pass a test. And went over to the academy to see if he could pass his test. And I knew he was a horrible test taker. I said, don't worry, you've been taking tests all year. You've got it figured out. You know what to do, what to look for. You will be fine. You learned all of your stuff. Your vocabulary is much bigger. You're able to figure out really complex math problems. You will be just fine. I was lying through my teeth. But he didn't know that. That was fine. He went in and he took the test and we had to wait and wait for the results. I was nervous. He wasn't concerned. Got the results back and he had gone from 4th grade level in math and English and 5th grade level in social studies to at least 10th grade level in all of the subjects that he studied. 10th grade, he was going in as a freshman. In addition, he had several subjects where he had the indication PHS listed after that. Now, I found it really rude that they would put these little initials up and not tell you what they meant. I ended up scouring the page to find out what PHS stood for. I finally found it down at the bottom in mouse print, about this big. I had to use a magnifying glass to see it. PHS meant post high school. So there were some subjects that he had studied where he had jumped 10 grades. 10 grades in 1 year, 3 hours of study a day. Does this system work? Yeah, it works. Does he test better now? Yes, he does. I want you to believe that this system is going to help get your kids, or possibly you, into a place where there is nothing in the universe you can't discover. There is nothing in the universe that you can't figure out, that you can't learn. It doesn't matter what skill you're looking at, doesn't matter what process they've been teaching you all of these years. This process works. It is for average people with average intelligence. It is not for geniuses, although it works really great with geniuses. Of course, it makes them completely insufferable because they really do know everything. But it will give you access to things you never had before. And I think once you get this method under your skin, you won't be able to think any other way. And your skills will go right through the roof. If this has piqued your interest, I do have another masterclass that you can click on that will go into more detail on how we actually use this system to learn something. We also have available a group think tank, so to speak, where we can discuss approaches to learning that will help you understand new material, because we know there's nothing new. And we also have one-on-one discussions, me and you or me and the child, so that they can pick up what they need to pick up and you can help because you understand how the system works. We want you guys to be successful. We want you to reach for the stars because there's nothing out of your reach now. Thank you.